If you are going to be with an entrepreneur, you have to be all in on the dream and the game just as much as they are. Entrepreneurs are a certain breed of people. You have to be very visionary, want to play a big game, be willing to work really hard, believe in something so much to be able to overcome all the obstacles that come with entrepreneurship. If you're going to be married or partnered with a person like that, you have to be on the team because you are very much going to be a part of achieving those goals with them. If you don't believe in what your partner is doing and are fully committed and engaged with them, then you will end up resenting them and being on completely different pages in your life, and ultimately the relationship or venture will fail. I have been on this entrepreneurial journey since pretty much the beginning of my career, and I'm also married to an entrepreneur. So I've been on both sides of the being supported as well as being the supporter in this entrepreneurial journey. And I can say that, coming through all that, I still have a very solid, happy marriage, and I've learned a ton about entrepreneurship that way. So an industry I've learned a lot about from my husband is crypto and Bitcoin. It's something that he's been very involved in the last 5 years or so. I don't know anything about it with real estate, but it's a space where that's obviously very entrepreneurial. It's very cutting edge, extremely volatile. And I've watched, some of our couple friends through it on this journey. And I think it's a really good tale of how, you have to be really committed as a couple to succeeding in something. So we know several couples that met in college in a Southern school where, people were doctors or lawyers, and they had, kids young and got married young and kind of followed this path, whereas they were buying into the idea of Bitcoin 10 years ago, have been on this journey of investing and backing Bitcoin in a time and place where it just hadn't gained traction yet. And it still is, has a long way to go. A lot of people don't consider it institutional by any means, but it has become a lot more mainstream. And these couples, seem to be very committed to the idea together, having their children through careers that are very up and down. I mean, you could just look at the graph of Bitcoin and imagine how their entrepreneurial journey went, or how unstable it could be at times in terms of income or net worth. And really going, well, now they look like they are these overnight success, super wealthy people, but they know that it took a very long time and an incredible amount of commitment to each other. So I think that's a really interesting case study of an industry that represents, or, and I look at couples and how they have kept their marriage strong as entrepreneurs. It took an incredible amount of commitment. And I can say when I first started my company, CA South, it was year one of my marriage. I'd moved to Nashville. I didn't live here full time when we first got married because I was still commuting to San Francisco. So the first year of marriage, as anyone knows, or the first year of a serious relationship, you learn a lot when you move in with someone about just, eating habits, sleeping habits, doing the dishes, all those things. But I was starting a company on top of that, and I was starting a failing venture company on top of that. And so that was kind of a crazy first year of marriage that my husband had to, help support me. And he took care of like the basic bills and things like that when I was getting my company going. And it was a incredible way to start our marriage. It was really tough, but it just goes to show what we've been through together and how much it takes both of you, takes two to tango in this game. The most important thing about being with an entrepreneur is that you both commit to the journey together. Meaning, if you just meet someone and you want to marry them and they're an entrepreneur, you are signing up and you have to complicitly agree to also be on that journey with them. Or if your spouse or partner is leaving their corporate stable role to pursue entrepreneurship, then you guys need to make that decision together before it started, because I've seen so many disasters happen otherwise. So it's a journey that you're both committing to together. So it's just common when you say, oh, there's the woman behind the man, or now it's the man behind the woman. Either way, it is something that you're both doing together. So in my household, my husband and I have had different points in our entrepreneurship where, one was making a lot more than the other, or it flip-flopped because of the markets or different things we were doing. And it takes a huge commitment and understanding of, what you're going to go through. And, if you're committing to this journey and you want to have kids in 2 years, and that's really important to you, well, this is probably not the path you're meant to be on. You have to be willing to roll and change your timeline on things based on what happens in this journey if you're going to be committed to it and be super successful. You have to make commitments to each other that you both agree that when you're making decisions in the business, the big things you have to both agree on. Like, obviously, you're not going to take, a huge amount of financial risk without your partner on board with that if it has to do with starting your company. You have to communicate and stay on the same page with your partner and make these decisions together, because they inevitably will impact your household, your children, your future, your life. So the big things in entrepreneurship have to be ran by your partner. You have to be very prepared for the journey. So, when Stephen first got into crypto, it was a very unknown field. I had no idea what he was talking about when he was talking about Bitcoin and all the different things. And I had to really, trust that he believed in this and he wanted to invest in it and try to understand it and really understand where he was coming from. But I had to be prepared to hold our investments a lot longer in our liquidity I might have needed for real estate deals, was tied up in the volatility of the market. And it was like, okay, well, I got on board with wanting to invest in something that we think is going to go exponentially higher, but it took a lot longer than we thought. And so I have to be on board with that volatility. Same thing with me. When I first started, I've had my own unsuccessful deals, and he, backed me in the beginning. Like I said, when I was first flipping houses, his first couple of years of marriage, he took care of all my bills and really supported me so I could just focus on my work, and I wasn't really contributing anything to the household or, doing anything and creating a ton of financial stress for him. But he was very committed to, me succeeding as an entrepreneur and succeeding in real estate. And he believed in what I saw and the vision I saw. I just didn't execute on it very well in the beginning. And so he stayed committed to that. And so you have to be very understanding. And if you're a type of person that needs to have 2.5 kids by a certain age, you need to live in this place, you need this house, and you want a lot of predictability in your life, you should not be with an entrepreneur. My husband, for example, sits on my board, and he offers me a really great perspective that I don't see when I'm in the operations and I'm running the team and running the deals. And in the day, I'm not as good at the 10,000 foot view, and he sits on my board and is able to really support me in that way and kind of look at bigger trends and things like that. So that's been a way he's really supported me. Another way he's really helped me is really I can focus on my work, and he takes care of all of our finances that have to do with our family and our investments and our taxes and all of those things. He pretty much runs. We really compartmentalize up the hats so that I'm not really worried about anything like that, and I can very much focus on my work. On the flip side, he has become a really prudent investor, and I take care of anything to do with the household so that he can really focus on those finance and those legal and sort of financial planning jobs that he does in the household. And so I take care of a lot of the logistics of the house, the nannies, the scheduling and things like that, so that I have an assistant and backup that helps me, but I really take care of a lot of the logistics so that he can kind of keep that bigger picture and keep the household finances and that part of his hat running. So we really try to we kind of divide and conquer and really try to support each other. And there's been times where, my business was turned upside down and it took a lot more strategic planning on his end. And there's been times where his work is a lot more of a focus, and I'm, my business is more on autopilot, and it's more about where he's going and how he's gonna, launch his next venture. And so for us as a team, it's really been about that push and pull and riding the waves together that has made it successful. I think it's also very important to be a fan of your spouse and what they're doing. And obviously, we hope that you love the person that you're with or you really appreciate their personality. But if you're an entrepreneur, so much of your venture or what you're doing is part of your personality. And so it really helps when you believe in your person and what they're doing. So, when my husband started getting into crypto, I read some books about it and I was like, this is really cool. I see why you're super excited about it. And I found a lot of commonality with him. And I'm a huge fan of him having that prediction. I never would have thought to buy Bitcoin before COVID, but he really has that bigger vision, 10,000 foot view of things. And I am a huge fan of everything. I'm a huge fan of that trait of him. And so I really think he's leaned into that because I am so supportive and I really back him up in that sense. On the other hand, he's always talking about how his wife's this super boss entrepreneur in Nashville and, posting on his LinkedIn about everything we're doing at CA South and, really feels like he's a fan of mine. And I think that having that love and support from your partner is extremely important because it's all part of this game of life. And if you're an entrepreneur, your work is a big part of your life. And, since they're so intertwined, it's really important that you support each other. So you cannot resent the entrepreneur journey with your partner. So if you signed up for this together, you knew what you were getting into in the relationship, you cannot expect that your spouse is going to be doing homework with the kids every night and going to every baseball game and having some super predictable life. On the other hand, I don't know a lot of people that have the level of not only financial freedom, but freedom of schedule as an entrepreneur has and can, do the things and build real wealth and have a real freedom over their time if they don't have a boss as an entrepreneur. But what comes with that is a huge amount of responsibility, and you can't resent your partner if, you can't have the house that you want by the certain day, or, you can't have a certain amount of kids in time. My husband and I, for example, waited 10 years before we were completely established in our careers to have children together. And there's, it doesn't always have to look the way that you thought your life was going to go if you're making this commitment together. So you can't resent your spouse for the entrepreneurial journey if you signed up for it too. Compartmentalizing your time is super important. So that means that when you're an entrepreneur, your work can become your life very easily and vice versa. And I think that in a relationship, it's super important, even if it's not a huge amount of time, but each week to block out those special times where you're not talking about work and you're talking about your relationship, or you're talking about your kids, or you're talking about, what you guys want to do in the future and what your vacation you're excited about or what you're dreaming about that doesn't have to do with work and logistics. And that's really important to kind of separate out the difference between your entrepreneurial journey and your relationship with your spouse. And even if it's several quality hours a week, we try to do it every evening when we're with our children. Even if it starts, later in the evening, we try to do a date night every week, things like that really, and you do not talk about the office either way. And that's really important, is to have that compartmentalized time. Treat it like a very important investor meeting or a board meeting or something. It's like, this is my time with my spouse. And we're going to go do, either this date night or this weekend together. Now that we have so many kids, it's more like we'll take 2 or 3 nights on a weekend and have a concentrated time together. And that's just been our successful thing, to really treat it like something that's just as important as work, because you think about it, it's 1,000 times more important. If you're miserable in your house, you're not going to have a successful business. So I just treat it like it is my job, right? To be a good wife and to be a good partner. And I feel, as he reciprocates that as well. So we treat our time together like a very important prioritized thing, and, make it one of the most important things that we do. I hope that was helpful to hear about being married to a successful entrepreneur. If you want to hear about that first crazy year of marriage with the worst deal of my life, watch this next video.